have begun the recording. Today, our next session in the bullying circle is about the workplace, and we will be talking today with, just to continue on the conversation that we started with the bullying circle in the schools. We're carrying on the conversation into the workplace. And my name is Dee Reinhardt. I am your guide today. Helping me on the maintenance of this webinar is Natasha Telger from Illinois WorkNet, who is a fabulous presenter in her own right. And we have as our special guest today Timothy Eavenson of Eavenson Employment Law. He is an attorney who helps small and mid-sized businesses with their employment law requirements. And we would like to welcome Tim. He is a wonderful asset for this workplace webinar. So welcome, Tim.
Hi, everybody.
All right. So what we want to do today is talk about what bullying is in the workplace and what you might see, how communication can help you. We're going to discuss the difference between cyberbullying in the schools and in the workplace. How can you help yourself or others, and will it ever stop? And my question to everybody is, could Miranda Priestley from The Devil Wears Prada have been a bully? Raise your hand if you think she was. All right, we've got a few people that think she was. All right, moving in. Who was the first bully in your life? We've got a poll question here, and we have, if you would like to read more about this particular article, I am posting the link into the chat pod so that you can read the results of this. But prior life experiences play a role in the depth of emotional injury that bullying can cause a person. Individuals who have never been abused in their lives may take longer to recognize that they are actually being bullied. Without memories or repressed cognitive representations of being the victim of abuse, bullying is a completely novel experience. So learning begins when you are first targeted for the first time in your lives. So that brings about this question is, who was your first bully? And if you haven't been bullied, you're very blessed. We're going to give this poll just one more moment here. And now, Tim, let's talk about what bullying is in the workplace.
Sure. So bullying in the workplace, I think probably follows pretty closely what you guys were talking about with bullying in schools. It's it sort of presents itself in a lot of different ways. It can be physical. It can be, like the slide here says, it can be nonverbal or verbal. What we see in the workplace typically is threats about your performance or your job status, or belittling you in front of coworkers, or it can be nonverbal, things like interfering with your ability to do your job effectively, or sabotaging the work that you do so that you end up getting blamed or punished for something by your employer that you didn't have any control over, but someone else did. And I think that one of the big differences between workplace bullying and school bullying is that we do often see in workplace bullying less of a physical aspect to it and more of a verbal or sort of an experiential, like the actions are a lot less physical and a lot more subversive.
So basically what you're saying is the tools have changed, but the types of bullying don't really change.
That's exactly right. Yeah. The bullying itself, where it comes from, what what it is in the personality of a bully, those types of things, they don't change. But the tools that someone has at their disposal in the workplace are different. So you see a lot more email bullying. You see a lot more, you see a lot more, like I said, just subversive, blocking your ability to do your job rather than causing a big scene or dragging other people into it, that sort of thing.
So does bullying give somebody power? I actually have a story. I consider information power, and there was a period of time when one of my bosses would withhold information from me, and it did not help me do my job properly. And I almost got in trouble for it. So let's talk about how that works in the workplace.
Sure. Well, I mean, bullying, just like in schools, just like in social settings, workplace bullying is about power. It's about someone sort of needing to hold that power over you or over the target of the bullying, and withholding information or standing in the way of doing your job is a perfect way of doing that. And another thing that's really important about your story, Dee, is workplace bullying does often come from your superiors. It will be a boss or a middle manager or someone in between you and your boss, sort of in the chain of command, that has just enough power to be nervous about the power that they hold, or have anxiety about it, and that anxiety comes out as bullying you because they don't know where else to put it. I don't know if that answered your question or not.
Oh, it does. It does.
Okay.
Does a bully in the workplace, we talked about in the schools, does a bully need an audience? But in the workplace, do they still need an audience?
No. I think that oftentimes, I mean, it depends on the bully, but I think a lot more in the workplace, you will see bullying situations that are one-on-one. Because I think in schools and in social settings, the thing that the bully gets out of bullying is the reaction of other people. It's that sort of drawing the attention to themselves type of feeling. But in the workplace, I think it's much more personal. And I think that a workplace bully is much more likely to isolate you rather than put you in a big crowd so that the bullying can continue longer. And so a lot of times you'll see bullying via email or bullying in one-on-one meetings. And then when other people are around, that person is a completely different, their personality is completely changed. But it was, when it's just you and them, or when they think that they have some way to deny that they're being that hard on you, all of a sudden the claws come out. And that's much more common in workplace bullying than it is, I think, in school bullying.
Exactly. So is a bully with everyone, or is the bully bullied themselves? We asked this question in the first webinar, and I've kind of got another television story example from The Big Bang Theory. The smart kids, Sheldon and Leonard, were making fun of a less intelligent boyfriend of Penny's. So it just doesn't really make a difference who the bully really is it? Does it?
No, and almost always you will see that the bully, especially in the workplace, that the bully is the bully themselves. I think that you end up with a I'm sorry, hang on just a second. I've got a computer issue. Hang on. Okay, sorry. I think you end up with people who are getting it from their bosses and then letting that trickle down to their subordinates. And so a lot of, when we're just starting out in our careers, we are the ultimate subordinates, right? So everything that starts at the top then works its way down to, the people underneath the top in the company, and works its way down and works its way down until it gets to your boss. And a lot of times when we're first starting out, we don't think of our bosses as also having bosses, but they do. And that chain of command goes pretty high. And if, we have this saying in the law and other places called the fruit of the poison tree, where, if you've got something bad going on at the top, it's just going to filter down and end up being even worse for the people at the bottom. And I think that workplace bullying often works that way. So the bullies are almost always being bullied themselves.
All right, I have a poll question here. So where can bullying occur? And I just want to remind everybody that whatever you type in the chat pod is being recorded and will be shared on our website. So please be careful typing in there if it's not public knowledge of what's going on with your lives. All right, we're going to take about 5 more seconds here. And then we're going to close this polling question. And in the interim, Tim, could you talk about violence in the workplace and how it relates to
The bullying?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. We've got example after example, it seems, in the past few years especially, of circumstances where someone has, just ends up getting ultimately fed up with bullying, what they're dealing with at work, and resorts to violence. And unfortunately, in workplace situations, that violence ends up being violence against themselves. I think that we see this in schools. I'm sure you guys talked about it in the last webinar. But the rate of suicide, when they examine the reasons that people commit suicide, workplace tension it almost always makes that list. And we have cases, across the globe of nurses that, moved to a different ward and suddenly became subjected to just horrible taunts from the doctors. There was a bus driver in Canada who his coworkers felt like he resembled someone that the police were looking for in a rape accusation, and they just teased him about looking like this guy, and he wrote in a suicide note that was the reason that he took his life. We also see examples of this coming back into the workplace. If I don't know if you guys are too young to remember, but back in 2010 there was a workplace shooting in Connecticut. It was the worst shooting in Connecticut history. And it was caused by a man who felt like he was being constantly harassed and teased, including racially harassed, and couldn't get anybody to listen to him, and ended up going back and killing between 8 and 10 people at his workplace because of it. And I think that this is an important point, is that he felt like no one would hear him. And I think that a lot of times what we see is that when bullying does end up leading to violence in the workplace, it's not because someone is bullied. It's because someone is bullied and then not heard. And I think that's an important thing for us to remember as coworkers, and certainly something important for us to remember on my side of things, on the employer side of things.
All right, we're going to move on to the next slide here. And what would you see in the workplace? And if the signs of bullying in the workplace are compared to bullying in schools, are they very similar, or are they different, Tim?
I think that they are. I think that they are extremely similar. First of all, I think that what you'll see is teasing. Although as adults, for some reason, we don't call it that. We call it belittling or even threatening someone's professional career. But what it is essentially teasing. Someone will find a characteristic about you to latch onto, and will try and make fun of you around other people, or will use it against you in the workplace. So if a bully, part of what defines bullying is that they sort of latch onto the thing that you are most afraid of in yourself. And so you'll see a lot of teasing about, you're just not good enough for this job. I don't know what you think you're doing here. We could have hired, so-and-so instead of you. Those types of things are sort of the early stages of bullying. Then when it gets higher than that, or even more so, I think you see different types of bullies. And another type that you'll see is someone who will try and destroy your ability to do your job, either just as a power tactic or to give them a better chance of doing their job. So they will blame you for their mistakes. Or like Dee was talking about before, they will sabotage your ability to get your job done so that later on they can go to their bosses and say, well, I don't know what Tim's problem is. He just can't seem to get this done, when they've put roadblocks up every step of the way. That's a very, very common workplace treatment. The other one is constant criticism, and I see that actually on the list here on the stop sign. And when we say constant, we mean constant. I mean a daily barrage of unwarranted criticism, where it doesn't matter what you do or don't do, everything you do is wrong. And that happens very, very often in the workplace.
So I've got the idea here that grown-up bullies don't really do anything different than school bullies, just the different way that they do it. They're a little bit more subtle about how they do it. Maybe they gossip, yes?
Yes, absolutely.
They exclude people.
There's a lot, yes.
Right. And then they tend to withhold information.
That's right. You will end up, one of the most common things that we see when workplace bullying ends up in court is someone realizing, right before they end up getting fired, that there were meetings being held that they didn't know about, that they weren't invited to, that decisions were being made that they should have been involved in, and they weren't. So being ostracized is one of the biggest ways that workplace bullying happens. And one of the reasons for that is exactly like you said, Dee, it's subtle. It's not like a school bully that will just, push you down and laugh at you or something like that. What we see now in the workplace is bullies want deniability. They want to be able to say that it's your fault and not their fault. And so ostracism, gossip, they'll spread rumors about your performance that aren't true. Those types of that's usually how we see workplace bullying.
So I saw this stat, and it's who are the bullies, and it said that 48% are the bosses, 45% are the coworkers, and 31% are customers. I never even thought about customers being bullies.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a problem, especially when you get, in the retail industry, which, by the way, I think it's the second highest rated industry for workplace bullying is retail, and customers are a big reason why. Part of the problem there is that there's not a lot you can do about customer bullying. There is a lot that you can do about coworker and superior bullying. So.
All right. Our next little thing that we want to talk about is constructive criticism. So what I'd like the audience to do is take a moment to click on the things that they think are examples of constructive criticism. And then we've got a question here. It says, do cliques in the office truly cause more problems in the workforce, and could that enhance worksite bullying?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think one of the most amazing things to anybody when they get out of school and go work, full time for the first time is how socially how much it reminds them of being in school. And cliques are a huge part of that. You will have workplaces where people will sort of gravitate to each other, and they will ostracize other people and decide that a certain group of employees are not as good as them, and that translates into the work that gets done. I think that one of the things about that's different about the workplace versus us being in a school is that part of being in a school is learning, obviously, but part of it is learning social skills and sort of growing, how you interact with people. In a workplace, everyone's focus is much more on getting the job done, and the social things that happen are kind of secondary. But when it bleeds over into the work that gets done, where if you're not a part of this group, then you're not going to end up going to a meeting, or you're not going to get the days off that you are requesting and they are, things like that. Yeah, it definitely contributes to workplace bullying.
Someone asked about the percentages again, and it said 48% is from bosses, 45% was coworkers, and 31% was customers. So now let's talk, the audience has had a chance to answer the questions about constructive versus non-constructive criticism. So let's hide that poll and talk about what the differences is, and how could unconstructive criticism be taken as a form of bullying?
Okay, how can unconstructive criticism or constructive criticism?
Let's talk about the difference between the two.
Sure.
And then,
so constructive criticism is when someone that you work with, probably your boss, points out something that you did that could have been done better, could have been done differently. But the way that they tell you leads to you being able to do it better next time. And the focus from all people involved is on you being a better employee, being able to better do your job. So constructive criticism begins with a criticism, but ends with a suggestion and a discussion about how to do things differently. Unconstructive criticism is what ends up leading to workplace bullying, what actually is in and of itself workplace bullying, and that's just pointing out that you did something wrong. And a lot of times it ends up being where an employer will tie it to the type of person that you are, or tie it to something else that you don't have any control over. If you ask for guidance after being criticized and an employer or a boss or a coworker just says, I don't have time for this, or that it's your job to figure it out, that's unconstructive criticism. That's basically putting you in a position of knowing that you did something wrong and having no idea how to do it better next time. And that is workplace bullying almost every time.
Okay. So how does bullying impact the community when it comes to the workplace?
How does it impact the community?
Right.
Well,
and you've got several different kinds of communities here. You've got the overall community where everybody lives, but then you also have the community within the workplace.
Right. And I would say the impact of workplace bullying on a community at large is kind of the same as the impact that it has internally at the company, which is that when there's workplace bullying at a company and it's not being addressed, that company doesn't run efficiently. It doesn't work as well as it could otherwise, which means it doesn't make as much money, which means it's not going to grow. And if a company doesn't grow, then it doesn't create more jobs, which means the community does end up suffering, the community at large. But inside the company, workplace bullying, I would say more so than school bullying. Workplace bullying spreads like a virus. It very rarely stays with one or two people. If an employer lets workplace bullying continue long enough, it will take over the company, and everyone will be tense, and everyone will be at each other's throats. No one will feel secure in their jobs. And when that happens, it causes a huge detriment to the company. It makes it impossible for things to run smoothly. And one of the things that I try and point out to employers that I work with is that hits them in the wallet. This issue ends up costing them money because they're not addressing the personalities of the people that they're working with. So it makes it a terrible place to go to work. And when people dread going to work, they don't work as hard, and that causes a problem.
Oh, very definitely. So let's talk about, how does the bully bully?
Okay, so this one I think probably relates back to school bullying in some pretty important ways. The first one is in personal space, because I'm sure this came up in the school webinar, but one of the things a bully will do is try and make you uncomfortable by physically getting closer to you. And that happens in the workplace too. I think one of the big differences is that usually in the workplace, when a bully gets close to you, it's to keep other people from hearing rather than to cause a big scene. A workplace bully doesn't necessarily want you to push them back physically. They would much rather you push them back verbally or emotionally or metaphorically, but they will still get close to you because it makes people uncomfortable. They will find ways to position themselves physically in a position of power over you. So if you're sitting, you'll often find a workplace bully standing, maybe leaning over you, pointing out something on a computer or on a shelf or something like that, so that you get the sense of feeling cornered. And then lastly, it's words. That's the bully, especially the workplace bully's number one tool is they will find ways to say things that is hurtful and critical and antagonistic, but they can then deny later having been any of those things. So it's sort of, there's a lot of backhanded compliments and other things that a workplace bully will say to you that will maybe drive the point home that you're not good enough for them without making a big scene with everyone else. And what that does is it ends up creating a scene where it's your word against theirs, and that's where most workplace bullies like to live.
Can money ever be an issue with bullying? And let's talk about that, how that can happen. And I'm going to be posting a link in the chat pod about some money management resources that we have available on our website as well.
It can, yeah. Money can definitely be an issue with workplace bullying, especially with retail jobs or other cash handling jobs. It's not to make it sound trite or anything, but the old scene of a bully, demanding your milk money can come back in the workplace, but instead of your money, it's the cash register, or the petty cash that the boss keeps in their desk drawer. And if you're in a position of having access to that, it's not uncommon for a bully to try and use that against you and say, I forgot my wallet. I really want to get lunch. Can you just give me a couple dollars out of the cash register? and will pressure and pressure you and use all of the bullying tactics to do so, and then we'll turn you in. We'll turn it against you when it's convenient for them to do it. That happens a lot. There's other ways. There's the pressure to buy certain things. When you get further along in your career, there will be the opportunity to invest in things. You'll have coworkers that will be having businesses on the side. They might try and pressure you into buying their products or things like that, and that can certainly end up being a situation where bullying occurs.
Sure. So would you consider scam artists bullies or not?
I don't think so. I think that scam artists are trying to trick you into something, whereas bullies are trying to exert some kind of power over you. A bully wants you to know that they're hurting you. A con artist or a scam artist wants you to find out after they've left. The other thing I think is that most of the time, con situations or scams are one-time things, and bullying is something that happens gradually over time. It's something that happens over and over and over again, and that consistency is sort of part of how we define bullying.
Sure. So let's move on to the next slide. So how can communication help?
Communication is the number one way to stop workplace bullying. In fact, I would say without communication, you can't stop workplace bullying. Bullies in the workplace, we keep going back to this point, but more so than in schools, bullies in the workplace rely on being able to isolate you. They need to get you alone or make you feel like you're alone or like you're separate or different than your coworkers. And part of the reason for that is that they don't want you going to HR. They don't want another coworker, feeling bold enough to talk to you about what's going on, or vice versa. So communication sort of short circuits that part of the scenario. You have to be able to go to someone at the organization and say, listen, I can't deal with this. And how you say it is very important. Who you say it to is very important. You do have to remember you're in a professional relationship here. And in all likelihood, you will end up working with the person who's now bullying you after you, quote unquote, blow the whistle on it. So how you handle that is really important, but it definitely needs to happen.
Okay, so I lost my poll question. Here we go. Okay, I'm going to drive. All right, here we go. So let's answer this poll question here. When will you be bullied more? One-to-one or in a group? All right. So the important thing about communication, Tim, is just making sure that you're saying something, and whether it's to you or to the bully or to someone in your workplace, right?
That's right, and that's really going to come down to the specific situation that you're in. My suggestion is to start with, if at all possible, to start with the bully. But in a lot of situations, this stop sign on the slide really says it all. About half of the people that go to a workplace bully and confront them say that it helped, but there's a big percentage that say going to the bully and saying, listen, you need to stop this, made it worse. And you sort of have to trust your gut with that one about what's going to happen. You always have options, though. If you can't go confront the bully in a professional way, go to your superiors. If you don't feel like you can go to your superiors, and there's an HR department where you work, go there. And if you can't go there, go somewhere. Go to your spouse or your girlfriend, to your parents. That's when you go outside of the workplace. But you have to talk to someone. That's the most important thing. And then the second thing is, if there's nowhere inside your organization that you can go to, you can try and contact, and it's bad enough, you can contact an attorney, and they can at least advise you on what your other options might be. But you have to tell someone.
All right. Next big thing, cyberbullying. And what I want to do is I want to pull down the last poll question and have the people answer what they think is cyberbullying. How are they doing on their answers there, Tim?
Let's see. I think they're doing pretty good, actually.
Yeah.
This is, yeah.
There's a lot of words here. I'm going to give them a few more minutes.
Yeah. Give them a little bit of time here.
So we all have cell phones, right?
Right.
And most of us have smartphones these days. So when cell phones or the internet are used to send words or pictures intended to hurt someone's feelings or embarrass them, that's cyberbullying, right?
That's correct. And that's just as true for the workplace as it is for anywhere else. I'm sorry, go ahead.
If somebody says, oh, I didn't mean to do that, or it was an accident, or I was joking, pretty much everything you say means something in your head, or else you wouldn't have said it, right?
I was joking is probably the most common defense of a workplace bully ever. 9 times out of 10, when a bully in the workplace is confronted, what they're going to say is, I was just joking around, like lighten up, you know what I mean? Or like I didn't realize his skin was so thin, I was just trying to have a little fun. And it's really important to understand that that doesn't make it okay. The fact that you were trying to have fun doesn't change the fact that you have hurt someone else, and that happens. I mean, that happens a lot in the workplace. People sort of don't realize what the consequence of their actions are, or at least act like they don't realize, and that becomes a pretty common excuse. Yeah.
I just posted a link to some statistics, and it said 4 out of 10 women suffered electronic harassment after dating using an online dating site, and that 20% of prosecuted online stalkers used social media and social networking sites as part of their modus operandi to stalk victims. That's just an incredible number. And
yeah.
some of that happens in the workplace as well, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, cyberbullying definitely doesn't go away when you graduate and get a job. It does change. I think cyberbullying is very specific for kids in school because it's an extension of their social life. But when you move into the workplace, cyberbullying, number one, you get corporate email, and that becomes a huge issue because emails being left off of emails, or one of the poll questions that was sort of down at the bottom that I think some people might have missed was having an email from your boss criticizing your work that's sent to everyone that you work with. That's cyberbullying. That is like cut and dry cyberbullying in the workplace. The other thing is Facebook, especially, but social media sites are are seeping into the workplace very, very quickly, and you will inevitably become Facebook friends with people that you work with, and that can cause a lot of workplace bullying problems too. Not as much posting content, like posting things on your wall, teasing you, things like that, but taking things that might be embarrassing or might be, something that you're sharing with your friends on Facebook that you don't want all your coworkers to know. Well, if you're friends with someone that you work with and they happen to, be a bully, they're going to pull that right off of their phone or their computer and show it to everybody that you work with, and that causes a lot of problems. It definitely does.
So I just posted an article that I'm going to quote some things from, and I want you to maybe talk just a moment about these items. Online harassment, repeatedly sending offensive messages and or the posting of racist, nasty, and hurtful comments using electronic means. That's kind of what you were just talking about, isn't it?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is, and it does happen at work.
Cyberstalking is online harassment that can include repeated threats of harm or intimidation or continual inappropriate comments.
That happens at work too, definitely. I think less often and probably less in the context of bullying than, I would put stalking almost in a category by itself. If someone becomes obsessed with you at work, they may not be bullying you. They may sort of be treating you almost overly polite and overly kind, and that causes problems of its own.
We've got masquerading, pretending to be someone else on a site and or posting material that makes another person look as if they are participating in cyberbullying.
Sure. This is catfishing is what we're talking about here. Pretending or setting up a scenario where you convince someone that you're someone else in order to cause them anxiety or make fun of them or put them in a bad situation. And it's interesting, we haven't seen too much of this in the workplace, but I think that it's coming. I think that as the generation of kids that have grown up with social media, and the people that are on the webinar here, everybody, as more of you guys enter the workplace, I think that this is going to become more of a workplace problem. So I think it's something that you should probably be on the lookout for. A lot of larger companies are starting to put together internal social media sites. So, instead of having an email system, you'll have what looks a lot like Facebook, where you will communicate with the rest of your coworkers while you're at work. And that's kind of a scary thing for guys like me, because we worry about this. Someone can pose as your boss and tell you to do something and get you in a lot of trouble. I think it's definitely something that this generation of new hires needs to be on the lookout for.
We've got two more items from this list. It's outing, which means sending or posting material that is sensitive or embarrassing, including forwarding private messages or images. And exclusion, which I know that you mentioned, Tim, is deliberately excluding another from an online group, mailing list, or text chat, MSN type conversation so that they can't do what they need to do.
Yeah, those two are big. And, on that third one that you mentioned, the outing, I think people are probably used to this from social media, but maybe don't think of it as much in the work context. But if you send, let's say someone that you work with an email saying that you're fed up with your boss and, you are, you're so, upset about this or that, emails are forever. Don't forget that. And if you send it to someone, they can easily send it to your boss or send it to everyone that you work with, and get you in a lot of trouble that way. And is that bullying? Yes, it absolutely is. But it may not make a difference when that email goes out. So it's definitely something to remember.
All right, let's move on to the next slide. So what can you do to help yourself or others?
Okay. So the big one is helping yourself. If you're being bullied, first you have to, I think, as I said before, I think you have to go to the person and just tell them to stop, and do it in a professional way. Say, I work with you. This is really unprofessional. I think we can have a good working relationship, but you have to stop treating me this way. I don't deserve to be treated this way. If that's not an option for you, if you genuinely think that the person is going to respond poorly to that, then go to your supervisor or go to HR. And the big question here is, do you think that the person is deliberately trying to hurt you, or do you think that they think they're joking and they think you're in on the joke? Those are the two sort of different types of bullies, one of which knows exactly what they're doing, the other of which is just very misinformed and thinks that they're joking around. And the joking around one, I think you can go to them first. The one that's trying to hurt you, it's probably best to hopscotch that person and go straight to HR.
Right.
If you see someone else being bullied, don't laugh. The number one thing in the workplace is the same as being in school. Don't feed the bully. Be on the side of the person being bullied. Talk to them. Make sure that they have an outlet, because not everybody's going to feel comfortable going to HR or going to their supervisor right away. And talking to a coworker may be a really good way to sort of let off some of that steam. And if you feel so inclined, and if you think that it's important enough, then you can go to your supervisor or go to HR and tell them that something is going on. But just be aware that the more you put yourself out there as a coworker, the more it may come back to you. There are definitely plenty of times that, especially when the bully is a supervisor or someone, in power, human resources or the other supervisors are going to side with that person. And even if you are accusing them of bullying, it could come back to you in negative ways. It's still important to do, but as a coworker, it's something that you have to weigh how involved you want to get.
There's 2 points I'd like to make here. That bystanders who see bullying violence can be emotionally upset, and that's very true, because bullying, whether it happens in school or at work or at a neighborhood park, can really create a lot of tension and anxiety. And it has a detrimental effect on the entire social climate of the location where it's happening. People tend not to feel safe, and they can't concentrate on the tasks at hand. So it could keep them from working. Instead, they focus on how to avoid being harassed. And that's especially true if it's the boss. Oh, well, what kind of mood is the boss in today? And bystanders are not necessarily always afraid of the bully, but some of them may fear the bully. So sometimes you just simply don't know what to do, and still other times you worry about if you do the wrong thing, who's going to intervene. So those are just points that we need to be aware of. And I saw in the chat that the boss might, you may need to just be quiet and keep working. But in some cases, you just really need, if you feel safe, as Tim said, to just step in.
Right. But yeah, I do want to make the point, like they said in the comments, this is your job that we're talking about here. And if you don't feel comfortable getting involved, you don't have to get involved. If it's not you being bullied, you have to make a moral decision, but you also have to make a professional decision about what this is going to mean for your career and what this is going to mean for your ability to do your job. And ultimately, that needs to be the most important thing. Now, that doesn't mean that there's nothing you can do. A lot of people think, well, I have to do something. Well, talk to the person being bullied. That's a great thing that you can do that will probably not be detrimental to your ability to do your job, but may be exactly what that person needs right now.
Right.
So just some things to keep in mind.
Right. Tim, tell me, will it ever stop?
It absolutely can stop. The good thing about bullying in the workplace right now is things like this webinar. It has become a national and even a worldwide issue. It's something that people are starting to take very seriously. I would say 10 or 15 years ago, we would just call this, having a tough boss, or having a bad job. But calling it what it is, the sort of the psychological aspect of being bullied, was a big first step and has helped in a lot of situations. Personally, if you are being bullied, the best way to make it stop is to communicate with someone about what's going on. Remember that bullies, especially bullies in the workplace, are probably also going through this trauma themselves. And with a good mediator or someone to sort of talk to both sides, you can end up seeing eye to eye on a lot of things. And there's plenty of situations where a former workplace bullying relationship can become a great working relationship, between two coworkers or a boss and a subordinate, but only if the air gets cleared. And the bullies have to sort of own up to the fact that they have hurt someone, that they've caused other people pain and made it very difficult for other people, not just in their jobs but in their lives. But that can be done. The sad thing is that that's not always the way this ends. And like we talked about before, if it doesn't stop, if we don't try and do something about it, we have plenty of examples of what can happen. And it's, the violence and the psychological effects of long-term bullying can just be horrible. So
going postal came from
workplace bullying. That's right. The phrase "going postal" that we all use, just to mean we're about to freak out or have a nervous breakdown, came from cases, this string of situations, I think in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s, where postal workers were just being constantly berated at work and belittled and harassed and antagonized. And case after case, they would come back and cause some type of workplace violence, including shootings and mass shootings in some cases, and bullycide, which you see on the slide here. They would go back, isolate that person that hurt them, and kill them, and then usually kill themselves. And we got a whole phrase because it happened so often. And it's still happening today. It still has that level of effect if nothing gets done about it.
Right. Well, before we answer the questions from the audience, I want to talk about these points to remember. People are the way they are based upon personal experiences. So what they've learned in their life is sometimes how they act. Words matter. They can hurt even if you don't mean it to be hurting them. And personal space matters. And very importantly, as the same thing from workplace to schools, if you see something, say something. And you want to be able to communicate the issues. You want to be able to tell the bully to stop. And if that doesn't work, share the incidences with the supervisor or the HR department. So, Tim, you got time to answer a couple of questions for us?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. We do have one person that I would like to share your email with them so that they can talk to you a little bit more directly if you've got a moment to share with them.
Yeah, that's
but
fine.
Then, is that okay if we put your email in the chat pod for people?
Sure. Yeah, no, that's totally fine.
So while I'm asking the question, if you can type that into the chat pod, I would appreciate it.
No problem.
On the left-hand side. So can you receive an infraction or a write-up for bullying in the workplace? And can you file a grievance for when your boss is bullying you?
Yes, absolutely. There's no laws that sort of govern how discipline happens in the workplace. So every job is going to be a little bit different. But in almost every circumstance, you will have a situation where there'll be some broad policy against, making it difficult for other people to do their jobs or causing, strife in the workplace, something like that. Workplace bullying is not going to be tolerated by any good employer, and so it's definitely grounds for a write-up. Unfortunately, not every employer is a good employer. And so, it's important to note that while you can be written up for bullying, there are a lot of cases also where people are, either written up or suffer in their jobs for being the squeaky wheel and complaining about the bullying. That does happen. It's not supposed to, but it does. And I think it's important still to communicate and raise the issue, but I think it's my job to sort of provide both sides there. So
I think the best way that a person can counter workplace bullying is just through that communication. And we had somebody from the audience ask if we could do a short role play about talking to a superior or a boss about being bullied. So instead of doing a role play, let's just say that I've been bullying you, I'm harassing you about getting deadlines done and not giving you the right tools to be able to get your job done, so I'm withholding information from you, and I've given you a really short turnaround deadline, and you've got 7 other projects that have to be done. So what would you say to me? Because this is definitely a situation of bullying you into a corner.
Sure. So the first thing that you need to do is go to the person when it's the only issue that you're dealing with. So make it a point to walk into the office fresh, is what I would say, or wherever the person works, without, don't do it in the middle of another conversation. So I would walk in and say, Dee, I really need to talk to you about something. I'm feeling overwhelmed, and part of it is this project that you've given me. I know you know what else is on my plate, and I feel like I don't have the tools that I need to get this job done the way that you've asked me to do it. I'm trying my best to do a good job here. This job is really important to me, but I need to be able to do my job the best I can, and I don't think I've got all the tools that I need to do it. Do you have any advice? Is there anything that you can tell me that would help me? And the reason that I say it that way, I know it sounds like I'm almost playing into the bully, but when the bully's your superior, there's a phrase, you can catch more flies with honey. And so if you put, you got to remember what the bully wants is power. So if you put the bully in a position where you're asking them for advice, you're sort of giving them an out. You're giving them a way of feeling powerful without actually hurting you anymore. And since they're going to be your boss tomorrow and the next day also, this is a good way to sort of reset your relationship. So you can go to your boss and say, I really want to do a good job for you, but I don't feel like I have everything that I need to get this done in the time frame that you've asked me to do it. And then they will either respond by saying, yeah, here's what I would do. Here's my suggestions. And then you can say, I'm still really worried about this. Is there any way to push it back another week? Make sure that you're asking questions and not making demands or making statements. And your boss will say yes or no. The other thing that they could do is bully you. They could say, it's not my problem. Get it done. And then at that point, you've got to go higher up. You've got to go to their boss. You've got to go to human resources. That's when okay, I've tried to talk to this person. It's not going to work. I got to take another step.
I was just talking to a woman the other day whose daughter was in a situation where the owner of the company at a small company was being a bully, and she ended up quitting her job, and that was the only alternative, because how do you tell the boss, the owner, that they're being a bully and have them understand it? So
Well,
could a
and
law
sometimes,
firm, Could a lawsuit arise from a situation like that?
Yes and no. Part of the reason that this has become such a big problem is that in Illinois, like every other state in the country really, we have at-will employment, which means that you can be hired and you can be let go for any reason at all or no reason at all. And the flip side of that is that you can accept a job and you can quit for any reason at all or no reason at all. We do have protections for certain things, like you can't be harassed because of your race or your gender, but workplace bullying isn't one of those yet. There's laws that have been proposed that would make this a civil crime unto itself where you could sue, but right now, just generating a tense working environment or even causing emotional stress at work isn't enough to sustain a valid lawsuit in most cases. If there are other issues there, if it's a gender thing, if it's a race or a national origin thing, that's very different. But even if you just feel like you're being bullied and you've got nowhere else to turn, I would absolutely suggest calling an attorney because there's a lot of laws and there's a lot of, every situation is going to be different. And I don't think that it hurts at all to at least, find out what your options are. So.
Right. There was a question here, what is the percentage of bullying from family members? My bully is a cousin. And I put this slide back up from the very beginning of the webinar, and there were a couple other categories, and other family members was at a 4.2%. So it's not as high as some of these other groupings of people. Let's go on.
And I can tell you just anecdotally from working with businesses, my experience is that family businesses have just as high a level of workplace bullying as any other type of business. So if your dad or your cousin or your sister is your boss, it doesn't mean that there's not going to be bullying. In fact, a lot of times it's worse because you're mixing two different worlds there. So.
Oh yeah. This person says, I'm trying to find a way that can deal with the bullying without getting fired. And again, that boils down to communication.
It does. And it's difficult when you're worried about being fired, versus worrying about, well, am I just going to have to quit? Because that means that you're being blamed. And when you're being bullied, the other thing that it's really important to say here is one of the worst things that you can do when you're being bullied is blame yourself. And that happens a lot because the bully will try and make it look like your fault. And it'll start to feel that way too. But it's not. It's not your fault. And so, I would say if you're worried about being fired, you need to find someone at the organization in a position to do an investigation of what's going on. And maybe that's the president or the head of the company if it's a small company. If it's bigger, someone in human resources, and you need to ask for an investigation as politely as possible. Everything you do needs to be polite and professional, and tell them what you're feeling, not just what's happening. I think one of the things that happens is a lot of people go in angry and hot, and this isn't right, and you need to do something about this, and and I can't work under these conditions. And that doesn't get you as far as going into someone's office and saying, legitimately, I don't know what to do. If you look as exasperated and scared and anxious and frustrated as you feel, someone else is going to feel that too, and that's what's going to make them want to do something. People take on the emotions of the person that they're talking to a lot of times. And so if you go in angry, you're going to rile up whoever you're talking to. But if you go in hurt, then someone's going to want to help you. So just keep that in mind when you decide how to communicate what you're going through, because you're probably feeling both, and there's no reason that you should do one and leave the other out.
there was a question about what are the statistics in related to bullying in the workplace when it comes to alcoholism and domestic violence, and I'm not sure about the specific statistics there, but I did post a link where I gathered some of the images from our presentation that had the statistics in it. You might be able to find something there. And then suggestions on where to start as a manager if bullying has been allowed to occur unaddressed for a long time. Do you have anything for that person?
Where to start if you are the manager?
If you are the manager and if there's been bullying going on for a long time that's been unaddressed.
I mean, you need to go as high in the organization as possible. If there's nowhere above you to go and you don't have the authority to change things at your level, God, that's a tough place to be. You know, it may be time to cut ties with that company and start looking for a different job. If that's not an option, or you think that someone is going to, if you think it's going to start affecting your job, like you're going to get fired or something, then definitely talk to an attorney, or you know, or someone outside of the workplace. But the other thing is, if it's a big enough company, they may have employee assistance programs, EAPs, which will put you in touch with psychologists or other, you know, workplace ombudsmen and people like that. Sometimes, you know, you can bring in outside mediators to sort of clear the air in a workplace. But I think you would have to be high up enough, you know, to make that decision on your own. And when you're on the bottom rungs, that's not always an option. So.
Right. Why would a bystander want to step in if it could cause problems for their job as well?
They may not. You know, I think some people feel a moral obligation to do so. But you know, I want to reiterate, it is not your job to solve everyone's problems at your workplace. And so, if the person being bullied is a friend of yours, you know, or something like that, that's usually where it happens. But you have to weigh the professional realities as much as the personal realities of getting involved. And if someone else is being bullied and it's not affecting your ability to get your job done, it's a tough call, but you may not want to get involved.
How does the conversation, you know how we just had the conversation with the boss, and then how does the conversation go with the boss's boss?
With the boss's boss? So this is you have to tread very lightly here, right? And you know, I know I've said it already, but it doesn't always turn out the way we want it to. You know, sometimes the boss's boss is going to side with the guy right under him. Sometimes the boss's boss is bullying him, you know, and so it doesn't always turn out great. But you know, if you go to the superior of your superior, you speak very professionally. You speak very calmly. You do not want to raise your voice or get heated when you're talking to your boss's boss. You want to say, I have a problem. You want to, I would say, prepare, you know, write down notes of the things that your boss has done and take them to their boss and say, here's what's going on. I want to make sure that I make you aware of this. Here's what's going on. I don't feel like I can do my job for this company because of what my boss is doing to me. And if you make it about you want to do the best job you can for the company, that's going to hit the boss's boss, you know, where he is, because that sort of makes you're sort of thinking about things higher than yourself then, and making it about more than just you. And that usually works the higher up you go.
All right, and last but not least, are there any pro bono attorneys in the workplace bullying arena? I know you don't work for free, and you'd be willing to help a couple of our people with some email information, but
Sure. Well, and for the most part, I work with companies. I work with employers. I don't know of. Um, I'm trying to think. There is one. I'm going to look it up and see if I can find it real quick. Uh, well, first of all, I can tell you the Chicago-Kent Law School, which is IIT's law school. It's located here in Chicago. Has a great labor and employment legal program, and they have a clinic that essentially acts as a law firm, and you would work with law students that are supervised by attorneys, and they may be a good place to start. The other one is the National Employment Law Project, which is at nelp.org. And they do a lot of different things. They do statistics, but it's all focused on low-wage workers. So they would be another good resource for finding, either sliding scale or pro bono attorneys to help with this sort of thing.
Okay, that's great. If you can add that first link that you said, Tim, into the chat pod, then the chat pod goes along with the recording, and
Sure.
the participants would be able to have that. So it's 12:14, and we've gone way over on our webinar right now. So I just want to thank so much both John Heiderscheid and Tim Eavenson for their time today. They've been wonderful resources on these webinars. We really appreciate the time that they spent with us. And John is with U46. Tim is with Eavenson Employment Law, and you can find them online if you need to contact them or even recommend them to somebody for their expertise and their information to help an employer or help another school system that you know about. So our webinars will be posted at Illinois worknet. .com, prepare bids. You can find these violence in the workplace and schools available for us later today. We appreciate your time and thank you very much for attending. Hope everybody has a great afternoon. Thanks a lot.